And he said, oh yes, he knew about it. So we went to Hawaii. Now, I think the best thing that we can do from now on would be to have you ask questions that you want to hear the answers, because after all, what I say to you, it should be what you want to hear. And if I can answer the questions, well, I'll be glad to. If I can't, I'll just tell you I don't know that answer. So if you'd like to raise your hands and with your questions, all right?
When you were a teacher, how many rooms did you have?
How many rooms were here?
When you were a teacher?
In school, well, when this one was open, we had 7 classrooms. We had 7 teachers, well, no, 10 teachers, and there were 7 rooms in it then. All these units have been added on since I was here, because it's a good school, and I want to say you have an excellent principal, and I told him that I hope he would stay here 25 years just the way I did. All right, does that answer that? All right.
Were the rules in school different from they are now?
The what, dear?
The rules.
The rules. I had a way of, when school opened, when I was in my classroom, I didn't say a word about rules, unless if that had been something that I'd said to the children as they were getting ready to come in. And I didn't say anything the second day. But along a little farther in the first week, I said, now, I want you to any rule that any one of you would like to have in the school, you tell them to me. So I went to the board with my chalk, and they began telling the rules they would like to have. And I wrote them on the board. And after they got through saying all the rules they wanted to have, they had more than I would ever have given them. But I said, here they are. Now these are the rules that we all kept. We did pretty well at it too. Okay. Yes?
Were you allowed to chew gum?
What, dear?
Were you allowed to chew gum in school?
I'm sorry.
Were you allowed to chew gum?
Oh, no, never. I never allowed not a single bit of gum chewing. One little girl said to me one time, but I'll tell you first why. We were in the cafeteria here, and once in a while you'd reach under the table and you'd find some chewing gum that somebody had stuck under there. And the cafeteria manager didn't like that. So I told the children that probably in chapel one day, no more chewing gum. And that means no more. And one girl said to me, Mrs. Phelps, I didn't know it was a sin to chew gum. I said, no, it isn't. But when you're going to chew gum, chew it in your own room or when you're out by yourself. But don't ever try to chew it where a group of people are there, because it doesn't look pretty. Okay. Any more questions, or does that finish you, folks? Oh, excuse me, honey. The too many tell you.
When did you say you were going to school?
What is it? In November 1950. We had 4 teachers at that time.
Mrs. Phelps, when you were teaching back in 1923 and the 20s, could you go through a typical day for us?
Oh, yes.
What you would normally do?
Yes.
How did you start the day? And
Chapel?
Okay.
Chapel.
Could you let the children kind of just let them know how their day would have been?
Yes.
If they were there at that time?
Well, the first thing that we did was, after we were down here and had an auditorium, some of the time we went to chapel all together, and some of the time, but I always had chapel in my own room. Now, we were given a great deal more leeway for what we did for chapel, but always the Bible was read and we had the Lord's Prayer. And the children were taught, and my children were always taught, if you forget everything else I teach you, remember when God's Word is being read or when someone is praying, give reverent attention to it. Don't ever talk or do anything that would be distracting, because we are hearing what God wants us to hear, and we're asking God for what we want to know. And they were, my children, they were very reverent. Anything else? All right, so you just have to say it kind of loudly, honey, because I'm not as young as I was when I taught school here, and I don't hear quite as well.
First school, where is it located?
First,
The school when you
Huh?
started.
Where's the first school located?
Oh, over here. Do you folks know where the youth center down at Anna Maria is?
Yeah.
That was the school. The middle part of that, the large room in the center there, was the one-room school. That was built, my father was a contractor that built that. And then the school got so large, the first thing we did was to hang a curtain and then hire another teacher. When we got to where we had more than one teacher could look after, and all of us had all the grades. And then by and by, the one curtain didn't make enough room. I'll tell you, honey, I'll answer yours just as soon as I get through this one. But then after that, they built one room onto the side. And then by and by, the school kept growing. The building doesn't grow by itself. And so they moved in some barracks. Do you know what those are? One-room buildings that were left during the war when, in a place where soldiers were being trained, you know. They had these rooms, they called them barracks, although they were complete rooms. We moved in one, not enough. We moved in two, not enough. We moved in three, and I think when we left, we had 3 or 4. I don't remember for sure whether it was 3 or 4. And more, of course, more teachers had to come in. First I started by myself, and then about the second or third year, at Christmas time, when we started again after Christmas, there were enough pupils to have one more teacher. And then the next year, why, same thing, only there were enough to have a third teacher, and that's the way we put them on, year by year. Yes?
How many rooms did the school have?
Well, now, which school, honey? You mean this school or the other school?
The other school where you taught.
Well, I told you we had one big little room that we made into 2, and then one room added on to it. And then these small rooms, or these barracks rooms, were put around on the campus in different places, and a teacher would have that one. And I went into one of those myself and let somebody have the room I'd had because I liked being that way.
How did the children get to school, Mrs. Phelps?
How did they get here?
Yes.
They came by bus. Clyde described the bus, the first school bus.
Well, Mrs. Cobb, she was the wife of one of the early settlers. She was the bus driver, and for a while she brought them in a car. But later on, the car wasn't big enough, and her husband Lewis was he was a boat builder, and he decided to build a bus. So we had an old 4-cylinder Chrysler that we'd had for quite a while. I think we drove it for about 9 years, and I had turned it in. The body was pretty well broken up, but Lewis took the old chassis and built a bus on it, and so Mrs. Cobb drove that. I don't know just how many children she could carry then, do you, in that bus?
I don't remember. There was all we could put in. You know, the funny thing about it was, when the children were all in it, it sagged down in the back. It looked like that's what it was, an overloaded vehicle of some sort with not too much holding it up in the back. And there we'd go down the road, you know, with the bus. The roads were as good as they are now, and that rear end hanging on. It never did fall off, but it looked funny.
Well, later on, as the place grew and it needed still a bigger bus, the county furnished a regular bus somewhat like they have now. And so Lewis took the engine out of the old bus and put it in a boat and used it. I don't know how long, but it just shows that was a pretty good engine in that old car. It lasted about 20 years, I think.
We drove it 11 or 12 years, and then then they took it was our old car, yes.
Will you continue with typical school day back then? Like you had chapel, you began with chapel and then...
Oh yes, we had a regular, then after chapel they all went to their rooms if we had it together. We didn't always have it together, but they would have it with, I would meet the school bus every morning. That was a religious duty of mine, to meet the school bus every day. Of course, sometimes I found children who were sick that no one else would have known about, you see. I'd speak to all of them as they came in. And then, of course, if there were naughty ones, I could just pick them out of the line and take them to the office. And so altogether, it worked out fine. And they were not allowed to run in the halls either. They would get off the bus and go in order back to their rooms. And the teachers, of course, were there in the rooms. And I was out there watching. Yes.
Oh yeah, what did you use for desk? Did you use a table or a regular desk?
They had desks, single desks, and then later on, when that's what we used. In every room we had single desks. Sometime when I have a picture of myself when I was teaching. I had my children in a circle. Does your teacher ever have you sit in a circle in your room, and then the teacher stands either on the inside of the circle or on the outside, and then they can you can get close to all the children that way. Yes,
Was there a kitchen in the school, or did you have to bring your own lunch?
for the first several years, I can't remember the date when we started, but everybody brought a lunch. And we would go out and sit in the yard, and the teacher, I used to go out, and most of the teachers would go out, and we'd sit around someplace and eat our lunches out in the yard. And then some of the mothers, I believe, started bringing soup so that we could have something hot. And then by and by, they had the cafeteria. And we didn't have Mrs. Miller. Mrs. Miller's not here now, is she? The cafeteria manager? I would not want to be here either. Mrs. Miller was just wonderful in the cafeteria. You know what she used to do for the children? She had the date of the birthdays of every child in the school, and when their birthday came, then when they went into the cafeteria that day, they had a birthday cake. And up in the front that she had made for those children, every blessed child in the school. She made one for me too. And and then we'd sing happy birthday to you, and so I don't remember whether we had anything else extra, but that was something to look forward to. But we had a lot of birthday cakes. Yes, honey.
Was when in the old school in Anna Maria, was there the tennis courts and the baseball?
No, we had a baseball diamond, but we didn't have any tennis courts. The playground wasn't so very large. What we did have was a lot of beautiful big trees that the children were allowed to climb. Yes. What did he say?
The cafeteria was made.
How many days they had what?
Yeah, we can't.
What was the
When
date
was
that
it-
the cafeteria
when was it built?
made?
Oh, this school?
No, the cafeteria.
Oh, down there. Well, see, we didn't have a cafeteria down there. Now, the cafeteria was built as part of this school, the new school. That was in 1950 or 51. See, I thought I moved in November of 1951, but I was looking up some records, and I really believe it was 1950. Yes?
Did you use the chalkboard and
Did you
I can't-
use chalkboards or paper?
Well, I use a chalkboard. Of course, we always had a chalkboard in front, and of course, I would write what I needed to write up on there. And then, of course, they had paper. That all of them had their own paper. But we sold paper and pencils and everything, just as you still sell. Yes, well, we sold all those supplies down here when I was teaching here. Yes, dear. Oh, yes. My husband and I bought some land, bought a lot, no, more than a lot, 2 or 3 lots, in 1926. But I came here, and then we moved away, and we had a home in Bradenton. We were away for a few years, and we came back in 1934. And I came back again to teach after I had been away for several years. They asked me to come back as principal of the school. I was a teaching principal for several years. Yes?
If they were sick, did they still come to school or did they stay home?
Who was that?
If they were sick.
If the children, if they were sick, did they still come to school or
Oh,
stay home?
no. I have called several mothers when I found a child that was sick. We had a couch, you see, to stay with that, and now and then, I remember one little girl that she was sick, but she wasn't so very sick. So I let her go in and lie down and rest, and then it's time to go home. She was ready to go. And then it suddenly occurred to me that she was pulling a fast one on me. She was sick every day. So I went in one day when she was there in the office, in the little room that you have, first aid room. And I said, okay, up, game's over. So she hopped right up, went to her room. But she put it over on me 2 or 3 days. Yes.
In the first school, did you learn out of books or just what you told them?
Heavenly day. No, they. Why would you think of that one, Mr. Cronus? Did they have books, or did they just learn what you told them?
I think there were books available.
We had books. Yes, we did. Yes, dear.
What if the teacher was sick?
We had substitutes, just as they do now. I could call into the office, and they would send a substitute out.
Did they have substitutes in the first school?
And then I'm trying to think. I think maybe I just had to get somebody to come in. I can't remember. That's too far back. I'm sorry. Yes.
Did you have a clinic, sir?
Yes, we had, down here we had the clinic, and we had a nurse that would come, certain days. I think we did it just beforehand, but we had a nurse every day, but I'm not quite certain about that either. Yes.
What did the Grinch book for back in the recent?
What was that?
What did the grades for that?
Oh, I see. Well, we've always had, of course, we used to have from the first grade through the 8th grade. That was when we had 7 pupils and such as that. And then it went on for a while. Then later on, they took the 7th and 8th grades out. I was teaching the 7th, 8th, and 8th grades, and that was one of the saddest days for all of us. The children talked about it after and said that when they told Mrs. Phelps, Mrs. Phelps told them, the superintendent told me that they were in the middle of the year without any warning, that the 7th and 8th grade children would have to go into Bradenton. And it was wrong. I don't care who did it. They should have been allowed to stay till the end. And somebody said, well, even the big boys cried. Well, it was a bad day because it was one of the happiest teaching situations I ever had. And it was sort of a self-running affair. The children, it was just a shame, but nothing I could do about it. One day, one noon, I looked out on the playground, and 2 of those children, those boys, came strolling across the campus and went up to speak to me, and I talked to them a little bit. And when we rang the bell, it was time for them to go in. They lined up. This was up at the old school. Those boys went and took their places at the end of the line. And we went inside. They went along in there with us. And so I just let them stay. I didn't do anything about it then. But afterward, I went to them and I said, now, boys, I understand that you want it. They got so homesick for this school. They said, Miss Phelps, we don't like the way the teachers don't explain things. And history was my favorite subject, and I couldn't learn it. And I didn't want to go there. And I just came here. And I said, well, now, I'm not going to report you this time, but you must not do this anymore. As much as I like to have you, and much as I understand how you feel, I can't let you do this anymore. So they didn't come anymore.
What were your hours at school?
Well, usually, due to the fact that the kindergarten children went to the end, most of the time, quite often, we began at 8. I thought it was better to begin it a little earlier in the morning, and then they got in. We had several buses, you see, that had to come, and that prevented any of them from having to stay at school too long and too late in the afternoon. Of course, I always stayed until all the children were gone. The principals were required to stay till 4 o'clock. Is that right?
Still are.
Okay. Well, I was always there. Yes, honey.
What, did they come at 8 and did they still leave at 3?
We had several buses, and the bus that came first, the children that got on the buses that came first, they left at 2:30 or something like that, and then the ones that came in last went on the last bus. I usually watch the loading of the buses and the children coming. Yes, dear.
When was the last year you taught down at?
Down there, I
Yeah.
retired in when did I retire?
1950 something, I don't know.
1950, wait a minute, 1950, 1958, 7.
Did it
No,
close-
59, 1959.
Did it close down after you retired? Or did it?
No, honey, no, another principal came. Mr. Sam Sheik doing it, no, you wouldn't remember Mr. Sheik. He followed me, he's an excellent principal. And then some others came in between. Yes? Please speak.
I know someone went to that school.
How long did you have first grade through 8?
What was that?
How long did you have the first to the 8th grade?
Well, now let me see. They said that time when they came in, it was about maybe 9 or 10 years before I retired. And then it just went through the 6th grade.
How many years did you have?
How many pupils did we
How
have?
many
How many
years?
years did you have?
How many years did you have?
Well, let's see. If we retired in if I retired in 1959, and I think that was say maybe about 1951 or something like that. I really don't remember. I don't have all of those dates written down, and so I don't know. I think it was about. Then of course we didn't have any in 7th and 8th grades, and I had the 5th and 6th, but I just started in with just the 5th and 6th, and just the 6th grade, I guess, until they made me a full-time teaching principal, and they had just teachers that stayed with the children. Yes, sir.
Do you mind telling me what year you were born in?
What year you were born in?
Now. What do you say about that, Mr. Cordes?
I think what they're trying to do is calculate some math.
If, when I'm one of those people who doesn't, I don't mind for people to know how old I am. I might ask you to guess. I mean, 84? No, I'm not 82.
95.
No, I'm 108.
Really? 73.
82? 90.
81.
83.
Well,
83.
I've been around a long time.
21. When were you
No,
born?
I'm not at all ashamed of my age because I think I counted pretty well for it. I am 83.
I said 82. I missed by 1.
What year?
That's down
Anna Maria School. That was all about. I meant to bring some pictures of the old school when we had 7 children, and then 9, and then 11, such as that. But it was the school was small, but 11 was had the most. And we'd go and bring our lunches and go and sit on the steps. The old school had steps on the side, and we'd all take our lunches and sit there and talk together and have a real good time. Yes.
Did you ever paddle the kids?
Yes.
Do you remember any of their names?
The ones that got paddled.
No, any of the names.
The children.
Yeah.
Oh, if I have my little book of pictures, we had Louis Belvin Cobb, and oh dear, I'm sorry, I didn't. Maybe I
Do
can.
you remember their name was Jim DeBona? Because he went there.
Who?
Jim DeBona.
No. Oh yes, I had Jimmy DeBona. Not the first year, but I had Jimmy DeBona in school. Jimmy turned out much better than we thought he would, but he did very well after he got out.
You ought to get some of those kids over there. They've been waving their hands around for a long time.
You right here.
What was your name? Jimmy DeBona.
My name, I was always Mrs. Phelps when I taught. I started out as Miss Rogers, Lena Rogers, and my husband and I were married. We started in first about, I think we started in August and closed early, and then we were married the 14th of October, and then I was Mrs. Phelps. Phelps? P-H-E-L-P-S. Phelps. Yes.
What was the first principal of the school down in Amelia?
You know, I have that somewhere on a paper, but I didn't look it up. I knew 2 or 3 of the people who taught. Mrs. Ryle's mother, I think, taught down here, was one of the teachers. They first had it in a sort of a home that was made into a school, and then later on they built the one up there. Yes.
How long was school?
How long was school? How long? Oh, you mean the term? sometimes 7 months and sometimes 8, and I think they went 9 months a little while, didn't we, during the year. It varied, you know. We had nothing to do with the lake garden.
What was your first field trip? Did you ever go on any field trips?
Oh, we went on lots of field trips. We had wonderful field trips.
What places did you go on the field trip?
Well, we went on bird. I taught. I had so much fun learning about birds and looking at them and learning to identify them and making lists and everything. And for several years, we'd have bird study for that took care of the science and a good deal of the composition. And then we used to go on trips on bird walks. Oh, several times during the year. Well, we went all over the. Sometimes we go in, and Ms. Cobb would take us, and we'd go way on down some of the places, and make lists. Everybody had to make lists about the birds they saw. How do you tell me?
How many hours did you stay in school a day?
Well, we were required by the law to keep school. What was it? 7 hours or 8?
I think it's
Yes, I think it was 7 hours. Yes.
Did you have any spelling?
Indeed, we had spelling. We had reading, writing, and arithmetic, just like they did always had in schools. And then in this school here, we did have 2 things that other schools in the county didn't have. We had the bird, a whole teaching about the bird, which covered the science project, And the children, they loved it, and they made some of the most beautiful bird books. And one of the women's organizations would give prizes at the end of the year, a white ribbon, you know, and a blue ribbon for the best one, and white ribbons for all the others. And they made these bird books and put all of their pictures and all the things they grew and things they tasted and the poems that they wrote that they heard, that we learned, and an account of all of our field trips went in those books. And then they were turned in at the end of the year for grading. Yes.
Do you have any kids?
What, honey?
Do you have any children?
Do I have children? No. That was the greatest sorrow of my life, that I never had it. Yes, dear.
When you ever went on walks, like, how long have you lived here?
Well, I didn't go, I taught for 25 years here, and I started, the last time, that's when we had the bird walks and all of that. And that was until, I stopped that in 1957. No, 1959, we subtract 29 after 1959. You subtract 25. See if I can come up with it.
When you ever went on walks, did you ever see any wild animals and snakes?
Well, I don't know. There are not so very many snakes. I remember one time there was some black snakes crawling around on the platform outside of the rooms, and the children started to get very excited, but I said they won't hurt you a bit.
You could tell
black
them
snakes.
about, you could tell them about the gophers down at the old school if they want to know about wild animals. There's
Oh,
plenty
yes,
of
we did have
gopher
these,
turtles.
the gopher turtles. Yes, they would come walking across the yard, and we had big trees down there, and the birds were in the trees. It was a wonderful, we could go out, they were part of our work. We'd go out and sit on the ground I brought some old quilts or blankets or something from home, and then we'd sit down there and make a list of the birds that we saw while we were sitting there.
Mrs. Phelps, we have about 5 more minutes. And then
Well,
we're gonna need
and
to-
I'm glad for you to tell me, because
and then we're going to need to get them back to the
Good.
classrooms and start getting ready for
I'm,
dismissal. So we
I was
will
just
take-
trying to answer questions, but
we'll
I'm
take
ready to
5
quit.
more questions. Okay?
Okay.
Did anybody ever get lost on the bird scene?
No. No. Mama was right along there with them.
This little purple one down there, she's ready.
Okay. All right, honey.
How were your parties celebrated? How did you celebrate your holiday? With the mothers bringing
The party, well, different things. Sometimes if it was something the mothers were doing, they would bring the refreshments. Sometimes if we had just a party at school, just in the room, then I think I brought the refreshments for those.
I mean, like a Halloween party or something like
Or
that.
Halloween, oh yes, we had all kinds, but that was the PTA sponsored the Halloween carnival, and we had a great big carnival out in the patio just like you did.
Yeah,
And costumes, oh my. Had who? A boy?
The board.
Boarding school, no, we didn't have a boarding school. We'd have had to board them out in the yard.
Did the children like the rules and did they think they were fair? They made them
Yeah,
up.
well, they made them up. That's the best way in the world. In case you haven't done that, that's a. Okay, honey.
What time did you go to lunch?
Well, the lunch hour, if I remember correctly, see, we had the kindergarten too, and they went first. It was from about 11:30 till 12:30, I think. Different grades going in, you see. Yes.
What time did your school start?
Most of the time at 8. And that is, I was here, and the kindergarten children, and they of course went right on back to their room.
You 3 people with your hands up, stand. Okay, stand up, those 3 people. Okay, and then these 3 people. Okay.
All right?
Okay.
Did you ever, teachers that was in the school, did you ever find any mean teachers there?
Men teachers, yes. I became the principal who trained the men that were going to be principal, and the school board sent them out here to me to train them. Most of them were very nice. But, yes, I had the last 2 or 3 years. I had once I had 2 med teachers. One of them, when he left, I had a letter from him when I retired, and he says, I used to think that you were too strict, or that you tried to, that's a lot of the things you did, but he says, now, I look back on it and I said, you know what, he was teaching in mine, and he says, you know what they do, it's just babysitting. And you must feel very proud to think that you taught those children and had them taught something. That was one of the men.
Natalie?
Pretty much.
When did the first school start?
But now, I don't know how far back a school went here. It was long before I came. But I came in 1923 the first time and stayed 1 year. And then I came back in 1934 and stayed 25 years.
You know, Grandma Cobb had the first school in her
Yes.
home down
Yes,
there.
she did.
Way
That's
back
right.
in the...
And then I have somewhere a list of the different people. There was one school, you know, one of those old school, those houses over on the Gulf. Was a schoolroom there. And this was the old school was built in 1917 or somewhere along there. The one-room school.
Jay? Last question.
Oh,
Did your school have any gifted classes?
did we have that?
Gifted classes for those children who...
Well, we didn't have a special room for them, but we did have, so that the gifted children's time was not wasted. You know, I worked that out in my room, and I think they all did, that they could do things. You see, the children could do as much as they could do. They had a minimum amount they had to do, and beyond that, and sometimes they could as part of the program, and parents were all over. There wasn't room to take care of the people who came, and they were interested in what the children were doing. Always, and I'm sure it's still true, the parents were so cooperative, so
So the May Festival is something that we don't have anymore, but as I recall, we could do all this in all the classes.
Yes, that's right. They had it in the evening, all the
right,
mamas
isn't it?
and papas came, and they sang. We had video groups. I had a chorus, then they would sing to the things that were more difficult for the others than the others, and then everybody participated. Even the kindergarten, they had a little song and dance.
Mr. Ernest, why don't we still have it?
I want to thank Mrs. Phelps for coming today. We have taped your comments, and so that way we can play them back for the children in case they have any questions about any of the items that we spoke about today. I want to thank Mr. Phelps for coming, and let's give Mr. Phelps